Welcome to In Pursuit. Everyone should be in pursuit of something. Join us in our discussions today with inspiring people who influence our lives and energize our understanding of what's possible. Stay in pursuit while we welcome our host, Robert Pascuzzi.
All right, listeners, welcome back to another exciting episode of In Pursuit. And today we're with my good friend, Jon McGraw. Excited to have you today, Jon. Thanks for being on the show with us.
Yeah, excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Right on. Well, listen, listeners, we're going to give you the proper introduction for Jon. So, Matt, tee it up for us, please.
Hey, folks. Hope everyone's doing good today. Today, we've got a really special guest, Jon McGraw. Jon co-founded Vision Pursue after its principles radically shifted his mindset, performance, and overall life experience. He's since guided and assisted in the successful application of these principles inside hundreds of corporate teams and sports franchises. He's a sought-after keynote speaker, workshop facilitator, and performance mindset trainer. Before VP, Jon played 10 years in the NFL, plus completed business management and entrepreneurship programs at Harvard Business School and Wharton Business School. We're excited to have you today, Jon.
Right.
Great.
Thanks, Matt.
For having me.
Yeah. Well, Jon, I want to jump in here kind of feet first, and I want to ask you this question because we understand, and I know you when I say we, you and I understand that results are basically 95% mindset and only 5% strategy. At a young age, is this something that you inherently figured out, or was it more of a study and application that you were able to embrace, I think, what I deem to be the principles of high achievers? Can you kind of give me some insight into that perspective from your standpoint?
Yeah, wow, that's a really great question. I don't know if I've been asked that before and I've ever really reflected on that. I think it's in some ways yes, and in some ways no. I think I didn't fully grasp the impact of mindset until after my NFL, towards the end and then post NFL. But definitely was fortunate early on to have been instructed in the importance of attitude and approach and trying to do everything with excellence. Mm-hmm. So there was definitely an appreciation for process growing up, but there was still a strong emphasis on results and outcomes and the what, right? The final product. And it wasn't until really struggling through that in my NFL career that I got to the place and really began to understand the performance psychology behind process orientation and the mindset and the how versus so focused on the outcome and mm-hmm. The final product.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. Russell Wilson, I want to ask you about this because he said something that was really interesting to me. He said that he had a high concept. At an early age, he worked on his concept. He had a vision or an idea of the athlete, the quarterback he wanted to be. And it took years for his ability to catch up with his mindset. Did you experience that? I know because you went through a growth cycle, I think, not only physically, but mentally when you got to Kansas State University where you played your college football days, and then especially when you went to the NFL, because each one of those stages, high school, college, NFL, requires, I think, a higher level of awareness in terms of the discipline that you have to have with your mindset. Can you talk a little bit about that? And do you relate to what Russell said at all?
Absolutely. Yeah. And Russell, by the way, is all over these mindset principles. And of course, Coach Pete Carroll is as well. So definitely relate to it. And I saw it firsthand. In fact, I'll never forget the first live scrimmage as a freshman at Kansas State University and a walk-on freshman. And I'm standing on the sideline and the ball gets snapped, the first live scrimmage. And the ball gets snapped, the play happens. And I remember immediately thinking to myself, I will never play one snap here. I have no chance. Because this is so fast. I mean, it happened so, and that was my first thought. There's no way I can play at this level. And of course, that was an accurate assessment at that time. But then just a couple of short years later, I was playing at that level, and then even at a faster pace. And so, what really struck me about that is for most of us, yes, there are limitations to what we can do in the end, but most of the time we don't realize that because the mind has not been unlocked, and we put these self-imposed limitations on ourselves. And so I was fortunate again to have parents and coaches early on that helped me, encourage me to believe what was possible, even though maybe the short-term results and evidence weren't supporting that. And to this day, I'm shocked by what the mind and the body are capable of when we really give them the tools and the skills that they need to succeed.
Well, and to that point, Jon, the mind-body connection, what's the biggest thing that you've learned? And I know when you work with your clients, and many of your clients are professional athletes or professional sports organizations, what are you teaching them? I mean, what are you telling these young guys? They're looking at you saying, well, here's a guy that played 10 years at the highest level in the NFL. What are the things that you're trying to impose upon their mindsets to help them circumvent, I guess, if you will, some of the roadblocks that you went through? Like maybe, you get injured and you're on the sidelines and somebody's took your spot, for example. And I mean, how do you work through those types of things at the highest level? Because I know things can change in an instant, right? Especially at a professional level. Yeah.
There's so many skills that can be applied in all these different situations. So injuries were definitely by far the most challenging part of sports for me. And one is, you alluded to it, of losing your position. But even more than that for me, I just felt like I was the weak link. Felt like you were letting your teammates down, letting your coaches down.
Right.
And you just never wanted to be in that position. And it took a really big emotional toll on me. And I didn't have the skills to navigate that as well as I could have. I think one of the biggest skills that we're trying to teach, really two primary ones when we go into a sports team or any organization. One is what you're talking about right now, which is simple awareness, right? Recognizing that I do have a default mindset,
right,
that was imparted to me from genetics and family and early childhood experiences. And that forms a lot of my worldview, and it determines for me how I construct meaning for my experience. And there's some good elements to that, and usually there's some limiting elements to that. And so one is understanding my default setting, and then recognizing that I don't have to operate from that place. I can choose a different response to stimulus or to my environment. So that's really number one, is the awareness that I have some choice and volition in this.
Mm-hmm. The meaning we attach to it, right? Sorry to interrupt, but it's the meaning we attach, right?
Absolutely, yes. How we tell the story,
right?
Because that drives so much of our emotional experience, which drives our behavior. Mm-hmm. And so the second piece is learning how, sometimes referred to as non-resistance, but learning how to embrace where I'm currently at. And we're really good as human beings at resisting what is and resisting our response to what is, and we're constantly fighting against ourselves. And an example for an athlete is he's got a lot of performance anxiety, he or she does, before a big game or big match, and they don't want to feel that, right? They want to feel confident, and so they start trying to chase confidence. And what they're doing is they're resisting the anxiety, they're resisting the energy source that's trying to help them perform at their highest level. And if they could just learn how to stop resisting that anxiety and embrace it,
mm-hmm.
they get to that place of confidence faster. And so we see that a lot in the corporate world as well. Just people are resisting change. We're resisting all kinds of things. And of course, 2020 has given us all kinds of things to resist. But the sooner we can get into alignment with what's happening by practicing, we call it embrace, you call it acceptance, whatever that might be, it helps you get into alignment with it and then ultimately have more control over your response.
Right. I see. And what, in terms of, your work so far this year in 2020, it's to me, it's a reset, that's going around the world. It's a time to reevaluate and see, what maybe has got us to this point in the past won't be what we take going forward. We're going to need to adapt and adjust. What do you see from your clients? Because I know you work with a diverse group of clients, all the way from corporations to, professional teams. Is there a thread that's running through this right now, John, with your clients, or do you just feel like it really is all over the board, dependent upon who you're working with?
Yeah, it really is all over the board, and the reason is that this economic environment has impacted businesses so differently. So we have some companies in the energy sector that have just been devastated, and will probably never be the same again. And then we have other companies that are in technology, and like Cisco and WebEx, and where their business is booming. And so it's fascinating to see how disparate the impact is and the different mental skills that they really need to better respond to their environment. Because when things are going really well, but there's a lot of pressure and we got to perform, there's a particular mindset for that. And then when we're getting crushed and there's challenge after challenge and adversity, we don't know if we're going to be in business next month and we can't make payroll. And there's a whole different mindset required for that. But I think ultimately the ones that we see navigating this the best are, to the word you used a little bit ago, they're agile, they're adaptive, they're curious, they're wanting to, they're looking for ways to endure, but they're also looking for ways to change. And they're looking for those systems that do need to be broken down and need to be changed, and different ways of doing business. And we see those companies navigating this more successfully.
Right. Yeah, we've got to be willing to adapt. And I think that's, when you think back to your sports career, because it was such a big part of your life, I mean, it's that old saying, I love that Steve Jobs quote where he said, you can't see how the dots connect looking forward. You can only see them looking backwards. And now that you can look back on your athletic career and see how the dots connected, how do you feel that your experience as an athlete, John, prepared you for what you're doing right now? Because you're doing great work. And how do you feel like that prepared you or impacted you?
Oh, thank you. I think the biggest thing was it created an environment for me to succeed and fail, and to have a lot of different experiences.
That's really good.
And participate with a lot of different leaders and philosophies, and see different philosophies work and different ones fail, and why did some work and why did some fail, and see teams come together and teams fall apart. And I think all of those experiences and injuries you mentioned, it's the personal struggle of trying to maintain performance at that level. So all those experiences exposed, I think, the parts of my mindset that were working, and also exposed the parts that weren't. And it was hard to let go of those. That was not an easy thing to do, but it really forced me to do that. And then, I think you and I've spoken before about concussions. Ultimately retired because of concussions. And so, I got to a place where like, hey, I really need to better understand not only performance and taking things to the next level, but just health and brain health and what's impacting it, and what I think I can be doing to prolong my brain health in light of all those concussions. So I think all those experiences, would probably be the biggest driver for me.
Right. What do you think, John, what do you think as you work with professional teams and athletes today, especially what we're coming through here with COVID and so forth, what would you say are the biggest challenges athletes face today? And maybe not just professional athletes, but even at the college or high school level, what in your opinion, what are those things that you're seeing that are just unique because of the times we live in today?
Yeah, well, the biggest one that we're seeing is isolation, aloneness, depression, just because they're used to being together, especially the team sports, which we work mostly with. They're used to being together. They're used to that camaraderie, that connection, and now that's gone. And how do you respond to that? And that's, for some people manage that better. Some are really struggling with it. So we're seeing that is right. A new challenge for them. On top of that, one of the biggest challenges that we routinely see and have seen for years, and I experienced it, was this overemphasis on the results, and an obsession with the future, an obsession with the next game. What's my career going to look like, my next contract, and constantly trying to strive for the next thing. And what that ultimately does is it costs them a lot in terms of the quality they bring to the present moment, the quality that they bring to their current situation. And I did that routinely throughout my career. And so, I mentioned earlier this process orientation, which is a big principle in performance psychology, of I have to retrain my mind to value the process as much of the results. And recognizing my brain doesn't naturally do that. And that can get me out of whack, because it's going to get overly consumed with the future or even the past. I would have a bad game and it would take me 3 or 4 days to shake that negative feeling from a bad game. My brain just kept taking me back to that. And that just can wreck an athlete. And so we have to train our attention to focus on what we have control over, and to be able to embrace the things that we don't have control over.
Right. That's really interesting. I've been studying a lot in terms of the higher faculties, which when we think of those, it's the will, imagination, memory, perception, intuition. One of the things that I think I got very lazy at and really had a lack of awareness as I was moving into my 20s and 30s and even 40s was the use of the will, the ability to stay focused on one thing to the exclusion of everything else, and persistence. And I think what you're saying to me is we get so caught up in what we refer to as the sensory factors, what we see, hear, smell, taste, touch, what we see, the immediate feedback, the stimulus we're getting, right? So you had a bad game, bang. That the meaning attached to that is this: you didn't get the sales closed, bang. You have an argument with your spouse or significant other. We immediately go to the default, the opposite, the negative. And one thing that I've learned, John, and I'm studying, is the ability to understand that truly nothing is good or bad. It's really our perception of it. And the perception drives everything. And there's always, for every negative, and even when it's a big negative, right, or a big setback, there's an equal and opposite positive if we look for it. But oftentimes we don't look for it. And I think that's probably one of the things you're alluding to, is the ability, whether you're an athlete or any type of professional, even a husband or a father, because we're dealing with our kids, is our ability to have the awareness of how to respond to things. And when you're coaching and teaching your clients, what are the things, and I know you've already alluded to it a little bit, but can you expand a little bit more on what are the things, the tools that you try to equip them with so that they have the ability to win long term, and they don't get stuck? Because I think that's what happens to a lot of people. They don't know what to do, so they get stuck. And then once we do that, it's just a cycle of going backwards.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question. And the way our program works, it's very systematic, and there's daily work on the mobile app, and then teaching and training that kind of wraps around it. And so they're given opportunities to practice, and this really is a train. This requires training, and ideas and knowledge are helpful, but they don't usually integrate into behavior change if we don't practice them on a regular basis. And so mindset training is no different than physical training, and we need to have a system to be able to execute on that. But to your specific point about this, you're alluding to this principle of non-judgment, of being able to say, in the near term, the short term, I really don't know how this is all going to work together. And I love the quote as well, Steve Jobs: we can't connect the dots looking forward, we can only connect them looking backwards. And so in this moment, we're limited in the information that we have. And so it's easy to jump to conclusions and say this is good or bad. But to your point, most of the time we really don't know that, because we can't see the big picture. Mm-hmm. We can't see how it's all going to play out. Right. And the greater my capacity to suspend that judgment, right, and not see that failure as final, right, and see that give things time to play out, and ultimately that's trust, right, or faith, right, of saying, I don't know how this is all going to play out, and that's okay, and I'm going to just do my best and trust that this is going to all work out the right way. And I think most of us can look back at our life, look at our past, and say, wow, things kind of did have a way of coming together, working out together, even though in the middle of a lot of it we were freaking out, upset or pissed off or stressed out. Life kind of has a way of doing that. So the greater our capacity to trust in that going forward, it just helps us in this moment access those higher levels of consciousness that you were talking about.
Yeah, that's so well said. Matt, you want to have Matt has a question for you.
So I think we've touched on a lot of responding versus reacting in this podcast so far. And, I'm 25 years old, John, and I think it's often it gets difficult figuring out how to differentiate when to respond versus when to react to certain situations. Through your growth, how have you developed that sense of awareness when to do such things? When do you feel the need to pull back instead of reacting and maybe respond more? What has been your process over the years?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think I think about it in two different terms. I think about it in terms of performance, right? And so as an athlete, early in my career, you're doing a lot more thinking because you haven't really trained yourself you can't trust your reactions. And so you have to kind of check, double check, triple check to make sure that what you're seeing is in fact true and is in fact reality. And that's what slows down players, younger amateur players. But as you master your craft, you begin to trust that your reactions have been trained appropriately. And you can trust that your reaction is going to be the appropriate reaction in that particular setting. And so then when I take that, extrapolate that outside of sport or outside of any mastery, I think that it comes down to how much system and routine you have and how well trained you are in understanding your environment. And I think the less knowledge or understanding or training you have in a particular environment, the more you want to slow down your responses and give time for things to kind of play out. Mm-hmm. So if you have that luxury, sometimes you don't, but if you have it, slower the better. And then as you get more practice, you can begin to accelerate that response time. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. Thank you for that.
That's a good question, man.
Yeah,
I think there's a big difference between reacting and responding. When we react, we give the other individual or the circumstances the power. When we respond, we maintain that control and power, right? Would you agree with that, John?
Yeah, particularly on a human to human level, on a relational level, absolutely. And because most interactions tend to be unique, right? And it's mm-hmm. easy to jump to assumptions and conclusions that you understand what's going on, but oftentimes we're not seeing the big picture. And so I think for sure, relationally, it's really important to slow down that response time and be less reactive.
Sure. Hey, I want to pivot, John, over to maybe some advice for parents. Okay, we're a parent. Both of us are parents. My boys are a little bit older now, but I still do have one in sports. He's going to be a senior this year. What advice would you might share with parents? It's been my experience that sometimes it appears this way, that maybe the goal is more important to the parent than it is the actual athlete. I think you can probably relate to this. Your kids are a little bit younger than mine. You go to these sporting events and you see parents pushing their kids and really, I mean, acting in ways that are probably going to be detrimental to the child's growth in terms of not just an athlete, but self-development. What advice would you have for the listeners in this area? Because I think it's an important topic, and I think it's a systemic problem, especially in the United States, because we put so much emphasis on sports. I mean, how do you see it, and what do you tell people?
Yeah, such a good question. We could spend a lot of time in this realm. I agree. I think this is a really important conversation that needs to be taking place more often, because yes, I'm seeing it before the pandemic and quarantine, I was seeing it on a regular basis of parents, and it's an unconscious program for them that they're running on, and it's doing a lot of harm. So the first thing I would say to parents is that the way that people in general, but in particular our children, the way that they receive love is through attention. And so attention attention says you're important, I value you, and I can say I love you all day long, but if I'm not giving you my attention, those words are meaningless. And so what often times happens is parents, we've got a lot going on. We've got businesses, we've got all these different things that are vying for our attention that need our attention. And it can become more and more challenging to give our children our undivided attention for no particular reason.
Right.
And that no particular reason is really important, because what we unconsciously train our children to do is that they get our attention or they get our love when they either do something really well or do something really poorly. Because that's when we snap out of our automatic mind-wandering brain state, and we either praise them, hey, great job, Johnny, for doing X, Y, or Z, or hey, that's not good, right? And now I'm going to get punished. And so we force them into these different silos of how to earn love or how to earn attention, and it can be really, really devastating for them. So as parents, the ability to give them our undivided attention for a certain period of time, doesn't have to be forever, but definitely a certain period of time, 10, 15 minutes, is one of the most powerful things you can do for your children, just relationally. Then on top of that, when you get into the sports, you get into their different interests and things where performance matters and they're trying to do well. The key there is being able to engage with them in a way, again, that values process as much as results. And so asking questions around, hey, talk to me about your effort today. Right? Talk to me about your coachability. Talk to me, what kind of teammate were you today? And so all those things they have control over all the time, versus, hey, how many goals are you going to score today? Right? Or how many points are you going to have?
Right.
That creates anxiety in kids because they don't have control over that all the time. And unfortunately, that's what we're praising them and rewarding. Hey, great job, pat on the back for scoring 2 goals, but they might have been a horrible teammate that day, right? And they might have been listening to coach. And so emphasizing the things that they have control over more than the things that they don't have control over is a really helpful practice for parents.
That's so good. I appreciate you sharing that. I look back and, I wish I would have done some things differently. And it goes back to an awareness. And a lot of how we handle it is what we grew up with, right? I mean, what we saw our parents do, and we go on. It's a paradigm that we continue to facilitate forward. I think it's an important area to evaluate. And my feeling, John, I don't know how you feel about this, but looking back now, I really think that the child is going to develop in a sport. If they want to develop, they're going to have, they've got to have, to me, they've got to have a burning desire and a real passion. If you want to play at the next level, and here's, we're talking to you, and you're 10 years plus in the NFL, the highest level in that profession. And you know better than anybody, if the child doesn't really want it and they don't want to put the work in, there's nothing in my mind looking back that the parent can say or do that's going to change that. I mean, what are your thoughts on that? Yeah,
I couldn't agree more. And forcing someone, down a path of something they're really not passionate about, that can be really, really devastating. And so, I think the more things we can expose our kids to, different sports, but also things outside of sports, and you can just tell when something lights your children up. Like right now, my son's really into cooking, culinary arts, and I just couldn't care less about it. Now I care about it now because he cares about it.
Right.
But
very cool.
That's I never would have thought. I never would have introduced him to it. And he loves it. My daughter's really into gardening right now. They're not getting that from me, but I want to fan that flame because I can just see, wow, they are just really excited about this.
Yeah. Instead of having it, I think, like you said, a presupposed maybe roadmap of, trying to only get them interested in a sport, right? Just embracing their individual needs. So that's really well said. Well, John, let's wrap up the next few minutes we have together. Can you share with our audience, again, the name of the podcast is In Pursuit. If you had to look right now and say, hey, this is the next big thing I'm chasing, that I'm in pursuit of, what comes to your mind?
Yeah, it's a great question. Thanks for asking that. From a business standpoint, we're just looking to maximize impact. And so getting our mindset training out to as many people as we can. I don't think mindset's ever been more important in light of, our environment, politically, economically, socially.
Right.
having these skills at our disposal is critical. Organizations, it's really falling, it's incumbent upon them now to address some of these mindset skills, and maybe it's not fair, and they feel like your talent should show up with these skills in place already, but they're just not. Equipping your talent with these skills it's not only competitive advantage, but it's the right thing to do. And so for us, it's very much about having a positive impact on as many people and organizations as we can, and then continue to be a good dad and engage with my kids as best I can, and all the areas of life that are important, trying to be the best I can in each of those areas. So that would be my pursuit for right now.
That's really great. Well, I know you do all those things at an exceptionally high level, Jon. So it's very inspiring, and I really appreciate you being on the show with us today. It's great to catch up. And hey, before we depart, can you let our audience know how to get a hold of Jon McGraw? Where do they go?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first, I just want to let your audience know what a tremendous mentor you've been for me and friend, and can't thank you enough for the coffees and breakfasts that we've had, where you've imparted a lot of wisdom on me. So for the
absolutely,
there,
brother. I love it. I love our time we spend together. It's so much fun. Yeah. It's all about learning from other people, and that's what we're doing here. So no, likewise, right back at you. I can't wait to get together again.
Yeah, thank you. And then to contact Vision Pursue is the name of our company. VisionPursue.com is our website. And there's a lot of information there on the services we provide. You can contact us through that. I'd love for you to come check us out.
All right. Well, fantastic, Jon. I enjoyed our time together, brother, and I can't wait to get together for a cup of coffee and catch up soon. So, everyone, thanks for being on again today for another episode of In Pursue. And remember to always keep chasing those big dreams. Until next time, thank you.
This has been another special edition of In Pursuit with your host, Robert Pascuzzi. Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed our program. And remember, everybody should be in pursuit of something.